George Washington was the first President of the United States from 1789 to 1797. Before he became president, he was the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War, and one of the founding fathers of the United States. Washington's mother was Mary Washington and his father was Augustine Washington. They owned a farm with slaves in Virginia. Washington became a farmer like his father. His farm was called Mount Vernon. He also worked as a surveyor, measuring land. Washington always wanted to be a soldier and was active in the colonial militia of Virginia. He was sent several times to the forks of the Ohio River, now called Pittsburgh. His job was to get rid of the French who were trying to take control of the Ohio River Valley. He failed and many of his men were killed. The fight opened the French and Indian War, bringing Britain into the 7 Years' War. In 1758 he was elected to the Virginia legislature. In 1759, Washington married a widow named Martha Custis. The marriage produced no children. Washington was a delegate to the First Continental Congress, which was created by the 13 colonies to respond to various laws passed by the British government. The Second Continental Congress chose him to be the commanding general of the Continental Army. Washington led the army from 1775 until the end of the war in 1783. After losing the Big Battle of Long Island, and being chased across New Jersey, Washington led his troops back across the Delaware River on Christmas Day, 1776, in a surprise attack on Hessian mercenaries at the small Battle of Princeton and Trenton, New Jersey. The British had more troops and more supplies than Washington, however, Washington kept his troops together and won these small battles. Overall, Washington did not win many battles, but he never let the British destroy his army. With the help of the French Army and Navy, Washington made a British army surrender at Yorktown, Virginia, in 1781, as the final major battle of the Revolutionary War. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. When the Revolutionary War ended, Washington was considered a national hero. He was offered a government position that would have been considered a dictatorship over the colonies, but in a surprising move, Washington refused, left the army, and returned to Mount Vernon. He wanted the colonies to have a strong government but did not wish to head that government, nor did he want the colonies to be run by a tyrant. Washington was one of the men who said the country needed a new constitution. The Constitutional Convention met in 1787, with Washington presiding. The delegates wrote the Constitution of the United States, and all the states ratified it and joined the new government. In 1789, Washington was elected president without any competition, making him the first president of the United States. While Washington did not belong to any political party, he agreed with certain Federalist Party policies, such as the country should have a standing army and a national bank. He was re-elected to a second term. After his second term, Washington decided not to run for re-election, despite his popularity remaining high. His decision, to stop at 2 terms, set a precedent that every president followed until Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1940. In Washington's farewell address in 1796, he warned the country not to divide into political parties and not to get involved in wars outside of the United States. Washington's non-intervention foreign policy was supported by most Americans for over 100 years. His advice to avoid political parties was completely ignored, as parties were already active. Washington went back home to Mount Vernon after his second term ended in 1797. He died 2 years later, on December 14, 1799, in Mount Vernon, at the age of 67, from epiglottitis, a throat infection. From his marriage, George Washington owned a substantial amount of farmland, where he grew tobacco, wheat, and vegetables. Washington also owned more than 100 slaves, who were freed upon his death. He did not have much money in cash and had to borrow money while he was president. At his death, Washington's estate was worth over $500,000.